History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to History Goes Bump Redux. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this Redux, we're going to the way back machine of History Goes Bump, the Jersey Devil. And we're throwing in some extra stuff here about the haunted Pine Barrens as well. Are you ready to go back?
I'm ready. The Pine Barrens cover 1.1 million acres in New Jersey, and the thick-wooded area has lent itself to stories of hauntings and dozens of legends. The most famous legend features the Jersey Devil, a tale about a mother giving birth to a devil baby. We'll explore the superstitions that existed in the area around the idea that devil babies could be born, and cover the various sightings that have continued far past what would be a reasonable lifespan. Did Captain Kidd bury treasure here? Does a black shuck wander the forest? And who are all these ghosts? Come with us as we look at the legends of the Pine Barrens.
Pine Barrens are also known as the Pinelands or simply the Pines, and they cover such a vast area that they make up 22% of New Jersey's land area.
My goodness.
That is huge. The Pine Barrens were formed in the Tertiary era over 2.6 million years ago, give or take a few. And I always have to laugh when I hear those huge numbers. I'm like, how do they know? The Lenape lived here before European settlement by the Dutch and Swedish. The Dutch and the Swedish brought whaling and fishing to the area. The British came in 1664 and they started shipbuilding because of the vast supply of cedar, oak, and pitch trees. Agriculture didn't do well here because of the soil, so there was a focus on industry. By 1700, gristmills and sawmills had been built and more settlers came. The prosperity of this industrial time eventually waned and settlements were abandoned to be reclaimed by the Pine Barrens. And so when you hike through there, walk through there, lots and lots of ghost towns, buildings that are taken back by the land and all that stuff. Sounds like a groovy place to go check out.
Groovy? After many left the Pine Barrens, those who stayed behind were rural backwoods families. For years, these people have been called Pineys by outsiders, which was considered to be a derogatory term. Today, many Pineland residents are proud of both the name and the land. The residents carried with them superstitions and legends, and the environment was perfect for these stories. The Little Egg Harbor River is known today as the Mullica River. The cedars that line the river stain it blood red, giving it an eerie tinge. The area is full of bogs from which iron has been harvested. This helped in the production of ammunition during the Revolutionary War. It's easy to believe that bizarre creatures could be inhabiting these woods. One of these creatures is the white stag.
Quaker Bridge Road was once a stagecoach route through the Pines. It was named for the Quaker Bridge. One stormy night, a stagecoach was passing along the route, and as it neared the bridge, the passengers could see a white stag standing in the center of the road. The horses reared and tried to break free, and the driver jumped from the coach with a gun and aimed to hit the stag, which ran off into the cedar swamp. You see a white stag and you're going to shoot it? Crazy?
Terrible.
The driver ran to where the stag had been standing and was soon joined by the passengers. They all saw that the bridge had been washed out by the Batstow River. They would have died had the great white stag not stopped them. From then on, it was believed that seeing a white stag was good luck, and no hunter would dare to shoot one. I don't think you should shoot one anyway, because they're clearly very rare.
The Cedar Bridge Tavern is located in Barnegat Township in the Pine Barrens. This is one of the oldest bars in the United States and was built in 1740. Even though the American Revolution was ended basically at the Siege of Yorktown, there were still conflicts that took place since you couldn't just radio everyone and tell them to go home. So there was a skirmish that took place here known as the Affair at Cedar Bridge. A loyalist by the name of John Bacon had once served in the Patriot militia, but he switched sides and worked as a freelancer, raiding and pillaging around Cedar Creek and Tuckerton. He had a gang of guerrillas that worked with him called the Pine Robbers.
And of course, we're not talking about the big furry kind.
No, not silverbacks or otherwise.
No.
Their first victims would be the Holmes, who had a mill and house that was plundered by Bacon. Most of their valuables were buried in the yard, so the men only got what little bit of money Mrs. Holmes had on her.
That was kind of an ingenious thing that they did back then during the war and such, is that they would bury anything that was valuable out in the yard, and usually you'd be okay then.
That's why the Robertson brothers took up metal detecting, I think. They go out into
it's a good idea.
They go to Civil War locations, Revolutionary War locations, and they do their, instead of duck hunting, their treasure hunting.
Looking for treasure. I mean, a lot of that is on the battlefield getting bullets and buttons and that kind of thing. But you might find some of these homesteads where they buried their treasure and either they passed away or didn't return, and so they didn't retrieve what they had there, or maybe they forgot where they put it. The group then hit the home of John and William Price. The Price brothers fled the house, which was good, because they might have lost their lives since they'd helped the Patriots so much. Next up was the homestead of Joseph Soper, who was a shipbuilder. One of his employees was a spy for Bacon, and he told Bacon that Soper had just received a lot of money for a ship. Thankfully, Soper had buried the money on his property in a small bundle and a large bundle. He led Bacon to the small bundle. Through all this stealing, Bacon and his gang had not killed anyone. That changed in 1782 with the massacre on Long Beach. Bacon and his men attacked the drunk crew of a privateer galley called the Alligator, and they managed to kill 5 of the men. Bacon was a marked man after that, and on December 27, 1782, American forces tracked him and his men down in the vicinity of the Cedar Bridge Tavern. A brief exchange of gunfire took place at the Cedar Bridge, and Bacon was killed, along with 3 of his men being wounded. 1 patriot was killed, and 4 were wounded. Now, the spirit of bloody John Bacon is said to haunt this area of the Pine Barrens. The tavern itself is said to be haunted by a man named John Wildermuth, who had once owned the tavern. He likes to close doors, apparently.
AC's on. Close the door.
Maybe. Yeah, he's just trying to save money.
The White Horse Inn is one of the oldest surviving inns in New Jersey, built in 1860. This first served as a stagecoach inn, and when the railroad came through, those passengers would stay. Many of them were on their way to the southern New Jersey iron furnaces. By the turn of the 20th century, this was an overflow hotel for guests of a nearby resort club owned by Prince Ruspoli called Chatsworth Club. Guests there included the Morgans, Vanderbilts, Astors, DuPonts, and Pulitzers. That club is gone, but the White Horse Inn remains and hosts tours, festivals, and meetings. It's also haunted. The inn once had a window at the top dislodged, and nobody could figure out why that happened. A police officer was alone in the building one night, and he heard disembodied footsteps. He ran out and wouldn't return. The festival committee of Chatsworth was having a meeting in the inn, and the group heard the laughter of a child, even though no children were around.
People who lived in the Pine Barrens for a long time share a story that Captain Kidd buried one of his caches at New Jersey's Barnegat Bay. And since he did this, they claim that the headless body of Captain Kidd is seen walking along the beach. And perhaps people might even see the black dog walking along that same beach. The black dog, or shuck, as they call it over in Europe, is widely reported throughout the Pine Barrens from Absecon Island to Barnegat Bay. This is a ghostly dog, and some think it is malevolent in nature. But this may just be the spirit of a dog that once lived. And some people tell the story of pirates on Absecon Island who attacked a ship and killed its crew, and this included a cabin boy and his black dog.
Another ghost seen near the waters is the golden-haired girl. No one is sure who she is, but many believe she is mourning a lost love who died at sea. She is seen wearing a white dress and crying. Legend claims that she threw herself into the sea. And there is also the Black Doctor, who is the ghost of an African-American man known as James Still. Still was born into poverty in 1812 as the son of slaves in New Jersey. He managed to get a bit of formal education and self-taught himself about herbs and medicine. He had to do that because, of course, he was refused admittance to medical school. He knew great loss. He married Angelina Willow in 1836, and she died 2 years later from TB. They had a daughter named Beulah, who passed away in 1839. He remarried and had 7 more children. Still made his own tinctures and essential oils, and eventually became a landholder of some substantial acreage. His health declined in his 60s, but he continued to work as a doctor. He died of a stroke in 1882, but that wasn't the end for him, and his spirit is said to come to the aid of injured or stranded travelers in the Pine Barrens. Cool fact, Still's son, James Thomas Still, was the 3rd African American to graduate from Harvard Medical School.
I think that's so cool. His father couldn't even get into medical school, and here he was able to graduate from Harvard. The legend of the Jersey Devil begins with the Leeds family, who lived in New Jersey in an area known today as Atlantic County. Atlantic County was once called Egg Harbor Township, and its boundaries were mostly water. The Little Egg Harbor River to the north, the Great Egg Harbor River to the south, and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. The district was established in 1693. It was in this area that Daniel Leeds bought a piece of land that came to be known as Leeds Point, and continues to have that name to this day. The Pine Barrens are also a part of this area that is today still a largely undeveloped forested area. Daniel Leeds had been born in 1651 in Stanstead, Mount Fitchett, Oodlesford, Essex, England. His father immigrated to America, and Daniel followed him in 1676, landing in Burlington, New Jersey. He had married a woman in England before he immigrated, and it's believed that she died before he came. We were unable to identify any records about her, so I don't know who that woman would have been. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
After moving to Burlington, he married Anne Stacy in 1681. It is believed that Daniel worked as a counselor to Lord Cornbury during this time. Lord Cornbury was Edward Hyde, 3rd Earl of Clarendon. He became the governor of New York and New Jersey from 1701 to 1708, and apparently he had a penchant for cross-dressing. Some of Daniel's duties included surveying the land. In the same year that they married, the Leeds had a daughter that they named for his wife, Anne. It was shortly after the birth of baby Anne that Daniel lost his second wife. The baby soon followed her in death. It would only take a year for Daniel's heart to be stolen again, and he married Dorothy Young in 1683. The two had 8 children together. It was at this point that Daniel bought the future Leeds Point, which was considered the highest point of land between the Highlands and the Capes of Virginia.
In 1687, Daniel began publishing an almanac. He was a Quaker and so came from a religious background that had broken away from the Church of England and believed in a more personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Quakers considered themselves all to be of the priesthood, and at this time were very pious and not open to other belief systems, particularly if they were intermingled with their own. Daniel had found that astrology was an asset to his writing for the almanac, so he included it in his almanac. Most of his friends were Quakers, and they heartily disagreed with Daniel going this route. When William Bradford published the almanac, the Quakers began to call it pagan and destroyed all the copies that were not already in circulation. Daniel took this very hard, left the religion, and began more extensive work on his almanac. He continued publishing almanacs until 1716, and then he turned over the operation to his sons Felix and Titan.
In 1688, Daniel published The Temple of Wisdom. The book dealt with topics ranging from angels to natural magic to astrology to the behavior of devils. Rumors were widespread that the Leeds family were dealing with things of the devil and that they themselves could be cursed. Things got so bad that George Fox, who founded Quakerism, wrote an article to the Temple of Wisdom called Satan's Harbinger Encountered. The pamphlet actually accused Daniel Leeds of working with the devil. Daniel's 3rd wife, Dorothy, passed away in 1699. Daniel married a 4th woman, Jane Abbott Smout, who had been twice widowed herself.
The battle between the Quakers and the Leeds continued until 1716, when Daniel handed everything over to his sons, and then something peculiar happened that might have helped fuel the legend further. Titan redesigned the almanac and added the Leeds family crest, which featured a dragon-like creature with bat wings and claws.
Uh-oh.
They already think you're dealing with devils. Probably not a good idea to have that as your crest. Daniel died in 1720, and there's no record that he and his fourth wife had any children. Titan got into a feud with Benjamin Franklin in the 1730s. Probably not a good guy to fight with. Most likely this was because each man produced a competing almanac. Franklin claimed that he had a premonition that Titan would die on October 17th in 1733. Titan actually died in 1738, but Franklin continued to mock him even after his death. It was after Titan's death that the legend of the Jersey Devil was born.
The common tale that is told about the birth of the Jersey Devil is that a woman named Mother Leeds gave birth to the Jersey Devil in 1735. To match this with the true history we know, this would be a grandchild to Daniel Leeds. Japhet Leeds was married to a woman named Deborah, and he named 12 children in his will. Possibly they were the parents of the child of legend. Mother Leeds already had 12 children, and this would be her 13th. She was not pleased. I would not be pleased either.
No, 13 babies you've pushed out. Mm-mm.
She was poor and couldn't feed the children she had already, so she declared, "Let it be a devil." When the child was born, it was horribly deformed, or became horribly deformed before several witnesses and actually crawled away from the womb and up the chimney. Some accounts claim the creature attacked a couple of people before escaping.
I mean, that thing probably just climbed right out of the womb itself. There wasn't any pushing involved. Can you imagine if it came out looking like a regular baby and then all of a sudden transformed into this horribly deformed thing?
Poor innocent little baby.
I know. The Jersey Devil's described as looking like a horse with huge leathery bat wings, horns, forked tail, and clawed front legs that are very short. It's like a T-Rex with a horse head.
No, it reminds me of, every time I've heard the Jersey Devil described, it always makes me think of the hammer-headed bat.
Oh, yeah. It's a mega bat, even though they're not, obviously not as big as the Jersey Devil is described. Right. But yeah.
The shape of the head, the short legs with the claws. And,
sure.
Yeah.
Big lips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Its eyes glowed red. The creature gave off a blood-curdling scream. Sightings of the Jersey Devil foretold bad things coming. Shipwrecks and storms followed sightings. The first documented sighting occurred in 1859. There was another in 1873 and another in 1880. Even Napoleon's brother claimed to have seen the creature while hunting. In 1909, sightings took off and thousands were reported, many of them landing in the Philadelphia Record. The reports started in January when a man named Zach Cozens reported seeing it on a roadside. He described the experience by saying, quote, "I first heard a hissing sound. Then something white flew across the street. I saw 2 spots of phosphorus, the eyes of the beast. It was as fast as an auto." Animal mutilations followed sightings.
After that year, no one reported seeing the Jersey Devil until 1927, and then the tale seemed to go dead until 1951, when a young boy claimed to see the monster outside his window, dripping in blood. After that, people claimed to hear unearthly cries coming from the forest. In 1966, Stephen Silcoch's farm was apparently visited by the Jersey Devil, and his animals were torn apart. People venture to Leeds Point to catch a glimpse of the creature, and there are still claims that something is living in those woods that is not a common woodland animal.
Makes you wonder, did it have babies spawn? Was it, some animals are able to...
They're asexual?
Yeah, so they can have their own babies.
Right.
So it makes you wonder,
have their
did
own
it?
Babies. They don't need a mate.
Yeah. Well, they just create their own offspring or what have you.
Yeah.
They fertilize themselves. Because if you think about how long sightings have been seen of this thing, up until 1951 and then 1966, there's no way.
No.
Not if it was started off as something human. Of course, it could be something non-human. After all, devil babies have cropped up in many legends. The Jersey Devil is not unique. In New Orleans, there was the Devil Baby of Bourbon Street, and there was the Devil Baby of Hull House, which I once visited in Chicago and talked about on a previous episode of the podcast way back when. Stories abound of the devil impregnating women and giving birth to his spawn. Popular culture's given us Rosemary's Baby and Damien of The Omen. But is there any truth to these stories, and why did people believe that the devil could impregnate women? The theories would have to originate in the Bible with the Nephilim. In the Bible, the fallen angels that took sides with Lucifer are believed to have desired women and taken them as wives before the Great Flood. These women gave birth to the Nephilim, who were the giants and men of renown. So they would have basically been devil babies, I guess. I mean,
I would
how
say
else would
so.
you describe them? So they could be very real depending on your belief system. The Great Flood was mainly meant to destroy these creatures. The Christians in New England would be familiar with these stories, and so superstitions and legends would easily be started. Most of these legends about devil babies seem to have taken hold in the 1800s when so many other beliefs and ideas about the spirit world began. Then there's the very real possibility of birth defects. In our current era, we've seen everything and know about all the various medical conditions that could make a baby appear to be some kind of, I don't like to use this term, but for these people, monster. Could it be that children that were accused of being the devil's spawn were really just normal human beings who got a bad break in the gene pool? Eugenics was taking root during this same time, and there was a very popular call to get rid of those that were less than perfect. America has a very dark history, just as most of the world does, when it comes to people who were born different. Freak shows cropped up everywhere, giving these people who were different in some way a place to call home and be gawked at by those who didn't understand genetics. The Jersey Devil could very well have been a deformed child that was hidden away, and then rumors were started. We had something like this kind of crop up with the Lent Mansion, too, where they might have had a child that was mentally handicapped in some way, and just, they would hide him away. And then you would think if they were looking out of a window or something, somebody would look and be like, who is that?
Right. He was kept locked away up in the attic, right?
Yeah, according to legend, we don't know that story's true, but we definitely could believe it, that you would just lock those children away somewhere.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Which, I don't know. Would it be worse to have them out in society where they might have been treated like the Elephant Man? So, it's just hard to know.
Was the Jersey Devil just a tall tale? Was the Jersey Devil just a hoax? Is this just yet another urban legend? Are there spirits walking around the deep woods and abandoned ghost towns of the Pine Barrens?
That is for you to decide. Oh, that Pine Barrens has all kinds of great stories that comes out of it, and sounds like a great place to go hiking. And if you like to do photography of abandoned places.
Oh, heck yeah. I would love to explore there.
Yeah, go ahead and Google it online. There's some great photographs out there of just, these old stone walls that are crumbling that probably was once a grand home at some point, or a mill or something of that nature. I want to thank you guys for joining us on this Redux. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.